Welcome back to Artificiality. I'm happy to have you here with us this week when we are here to talk about how AI affects critical thinking. So,
Gonna give you two guesses.
I'm going to let you tell me. I'm not going to guess.
This is a paper that came out last week-ish called AI Tools in Society and Impacts on Cognitive Offloading in the Future of Critical Thinking. It's an interesting paper because there's a little bit of no surprises here, but it's kind of interesting to see a little bit more of the detail underneath it. It's a study that really does try and explore this growing reliance on AI tools, like particularly, obviously, ChatGPT, and not just its effects on things like sort of how much more productive you are or anything like that, but it really plays into more of the sort of what we see in education, which is concerns about critical thinking. And surprise, surprise, the more you rely on AI tools, the more you don't develop your critical thinking skills. But it's specifically through a process called cognitive offloading. Now, cognitive offloading can be a really good thing, right? It's really nice to be able to use our phones to remember other people's phone numbers.
Yeah.
I remember 2 phone numbers, yours and the one that I had when I was 6 years old. I have no memory of any other phone.
And you only know mine not because you dial it, but because that's what you type into forms around the internet.
Yeah.
It's your own phone number.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I suppose I do remember my own phone number, but I have to really think for that one. So this cognitive offloading is good, right? We have limited computational capacity in our own minds, so why not put it out there into the world? And we do that with our spatial reasoning and various other things. But we're doing more and more of it with AI, and it's this desire and this need to cognitively offload that actually ends up mediating whether or not the use of AI tools affects our critical thinking. So that is pretty straight line effect from the more you cognitively offload into an AI tool, the less likely you are to develop your critical thinking skills. And that we now see that sort of really bedded down. And the thing that intrigued me the most about this really is that there's a couple of kind of key links. One is we do less deep reflective thinking. We just sort of jump in and say, that's the answer, let's go. There's good, data here, good evidence here that education makes a difference. So the more educated you are, the more you think, maybe I don't want to erode my critical thinking skills. So I'm going to slow down and put a little bit more thought into this and check the AI or check the outputs. But younger users and less educated users tend to do that less. So we are sort of moving into this new domain where we can talk about how we need to teach people about this effect, but we now actually need to do it. And there needs to be a much greater active, proactive acknowledgement that education systems actually need to really teach people how to be more actively engaged in using AI tools, actually be more metacognitive.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's hard to do anyway, but it's going to be really hard with teenagers. But there are people that are doing good work in this area, and I think ed tech is definitely, obviously highly aware of this as all the teachers we've ever and educators we've ever spoken to. But I think it really does sort of now draw this out. And one of the other parts of it that's so interesting is this. We've got the tool use per se, we've got the educational interaction, but it's also this reliance on using AI for making decisions and becoming unable to make a decision without running it through the AI first. Given how much time we spend on generative AI and decision making, that's one of the things that caught my eye about this paper.
So I found this really fascinating. What how do you think about what this means in terms of how we think about what sort of our essential skills are and how we develop them? Like cognitive thinking, cognitive offloading gets in the way of critical thinking. What does that mean in terms of the bigger picture? Our critical thinking skills getting in the way of, but we're getting the answers out of the machine. That would be sort of the answer from some people as well. You're already getting the answer out of the machine. So does it really matter?
Yeah, I think it does matter.
I'm setting you up with an obvious answer, but I'm asking anyway.
Exactly. Well, I think it does matter. And there's a couple of different ways to sort of answer your question. I'm going to sort of stay at that high level.
Yep.
One of the models that I've always, respected and like about this was, and it's how David Krakauer from SFI talks about it, but he kind of got the idea from our friend Don Norman, who talks about, affordances and what have you. And Krakauer talks about competitive cognitive architects or complementary cognitive architects. And complementary gives us this enhancement of our skills because it leaves a trace in our mind. So a complementary cognitive artifact is a map. When we use a physical map or a digital map, but when we use a map and we're thinking and we're back and forth, and we have some agency in how we're assimilating that. And we have cues to know that the map is not the territory, right? That there's an interpretation that comes with a map. A map of streets and a city is a different map than a topographical map for being in the wilderness. And so you can learn to use a map, take the map away, and you still know how to navigate. It's complementary. A competitive cognitive artifact, you take it away, you can't do it. So you only navigate by GPS, you take it away, you can't do it. And more and more, I think we need to think about what it means for a technology to be in one of those camps. Neither are inherently better or worse. I actually think there's quite a lot of personal choice. Like, I'm like maps. You like GPS. I care a lot about being able to navigate. You don't care.
I just want to get there.
You just want to get there. And you're prepared to take the risk that one day it's not available to you and you'll figure it out when the time comes.
Because I got you.
I'd be like, what if I do? You don't have me, So here's another example of how, we're starting to appreciate just how much of our knowledge comes from our community. I'm not sure we've got to the point yet where we know how much critical thinking comes from our community. And I think we can see that AI isn't necessarily the best place to go to for critical thinking unless you go to it for that particular reason. So I think that's sort of how I think about this. There are things, you go to the next level, which is there are things we are happy to lose. I just finished a really interesting book about the extinction of our embodied physical experience and what would mean for some of those things to go away. And I didn't realize, fun fact, that if you're not taught to write cursive, you're never able to read it. And that is, to the author, that was horrific when you think about reading the documents of the US founding fathers. I mean, I don't care about cursive, but a lot of people do.
Sure.
And I get the principle, and I'm not sure how we figure out as a society what things we are prepared to leave behind, because clearly there are things that don't serve us, and clearly there are things that we're quite happy to leave behind. But I don't think critical thinking is one of them. I think it's definitely something that we want to hold on to, and we probably need a bigger dose of it these days. And so I think one of the ways I think about it from, say, a product design perspective is we just need a little bit more friction, and we need to value some of those frictions. We need to, what's the right time to value struggle? Because it's a good idea, not just because you might learn more, but because the relief from struggle is actually good in itself. That's part of what dopamine does for us, right? And we've got all these 5 kids, and we know that one of them specifically says, I use ChatGPT because I feel like I'm not learning anything. And that is a metacognitive, self-reflective, self-improving moment.
So I had a moment of thinking about this, well, more than a moment, think about how to frame this question of cognitive offloading in terms of the current design of these products. And what's interesting is that I'm gonna walk through a few ideas of where I think the gaps are. I'm gonna say that though with the caveat that we don't know what the right design is. It's not that it's this is an interesting sort of design evaluation because it isn't something you could say, oh well, here's the right way to do this.
Well, I assume it's context dependent.
It's context dependent, but if we're on a journey where we don't really know what the right kind of design is for this kind of intelligence yet, right? So, one of our running sort of ideas is that we're going through a design transition that is as significant or more significant than everything back to the transition to a GUI, in 1984. And so we're still really trying to figure out what it means to design something that allows us to interface with an intelligent technology that we have now. So with that caveat instead, so here's sort of my ideas. One is that we have this problem of we're moving from being creators to being editors when we're using these tools for writing. So you have this idea that you prompt it, you get this full answer, totally written. And then in order to use it, you copy and paste it, which is a problem in and of itself, that there isn't any workflows. I'm really disappointed that even in Gemini, I can't say, can you make a Google Doc out of this? Park that.
And in their deep research product, they do say that, but you hit the button, nothing.
And it doesn't work. So you copy and you paste it, and then you have this full document. Now, when we're doing our critical thinking or normal thing to write something, we are going through the struggle of actually writing, thinking about it, organizing our thoughts, expressing them, writing, generating the content ourselves. Now we're becoming editors. And there aren't very many of us that are actually good editors, that are trained as editors. We know this. We actually had the privilege of having one of the great journalist editors in the world, Kevin Delaney, be our editor. It's a skill set that is really quite advanced and specialized. But suddenly everyone is dropped into the role of being an editor. I now have this big full text. What do I do with it? I have to start editing it. I have to decide, move things around. That's not a normal process for most people, which means that we just sort of go, okay, copy, paste, send, right? Because we're not sure, we don't have a good pathway to understand it. So I think that's one problem, is like the assumption in the workflow now is that we're editors, and we haven't learned how to be editors, really. Second is this concept of kind of like the expert is in, right? So you have this, for a conversational interface, there's an ironic lack of discussion. I'm looking for this. Dang, it already finishes it. It's all done. And then it says, would you like me to refine anything?
Oh, but in Claude and ChatGPT now, you can like go in the projects, not projects, in Canvas sort of style, you can go to different parts and you can
ask it to work with you. You can ask it to give you questions. You can ask it to go to structure things before you. You can ask it, but then we're assuming the user is knowledgeable and understanding enough of the need for struggle to create the struggle.
Well, and there's a different kind of struggle too, because you can work in Claude particularly as in that sort of, I want you to be an editor, we're going to sit in Canvas, we're going to do da-da-da-da. And that has struggle. But what tends to happen is that the struggle becomes the struggle with the machine, and the machine not actually doing what you want it to do, and it becomes frustration. And what the struggle actually is back at you again, because you're writing about the wrong thing.
Yes.
So it all still comes, finger still points back at the human, saying you have to take ownership of that and accountability of that thought process. And that's another thing that this paper pulled up, was one of the core failures that was starting to become apparent, was that people don't take they don't have a sense of responsibility, and they don't take accountability for what's actually coming out, and they pass it off as theirs.
Yeah.
But they don't, in the end, say it is theirs.
Yeah. But the whole point of this, to me, the expert is that the flow of the application is the easiest pathway for the user is to just get the answer. And it presents in a way as if it's complete. And at the bottom, it'll say something like, would you like me to refine any small parts of this? Right. Which gives you the assumption, right? You're being told by this, planetary intelligence.
I would say conditioned.
That this is done. It's perfect, unless you want to literally. And so the easy path is cognitive offloading, right? That's the streamline. You have to
You're
work.
saying it's sort of the default.
Yes, the default is the cognitive offloading. So we're pushing that. That's the way the design takes you. It doesn't invite you into anything that has any sort of challenge.
And I want to go back here because just before you move to the next point, editing. The way I've come to see editing over, the listening to people who are editors talk about how they wrestle with this, is actually a more embodied experience. That what editing is, and I think I was listening to Adam Moss, who wrote a great book about the work of art. It's up there on the shelf. The work of art, like actually producing. Working at art, talking with Ezra Klein about this, and they were having this conversation. It was just such a beautiful conversation because it was what editing is the feeling that something's off, but then the confidence to respond to that feeling that something's off. There's like two steps there because there's a lot of times you can read it and go, oh, that's off. And then you just don't do anything about it. Yeah. Whereas that process is to complete the circle and say, I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to trust that my sense of this being off is right, and I'm going to act. So it's a decide act. It's not just a
And what you're outlining is a serious challenge to learn how to do.
It's hard.
It's very hard.
I think they use the word confidence. It takes a long time to build that.
And if your task is to write a 3-page document about whatever, the struggle to write that from scratch yourself is required to create the document if you don't use an LLM, right? So you're going to push yourself through. You are required to go through critical thinking steps in order to make that. But when you're using an LLM, you're not required to use any critical thinking. It's a prompt, copy, paste, send. You have to create the desire, the need, to actually learn to go through the struggle of editing.
Yeah, it has to well up inside you.
Exactly. And there's nothing in this workflow that makes that apparent, number one, that's what you should be doing, or two, makes it required so that we're actually using our own brains, right? The easy path is complete and utter offloading.
No, we have talked to people that put into their their configurations, don't let me do that.
Yeah.
But I did that, and it was more than annoying. It was annoying and useless.
Yes.
Because it would come up at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So not ready for prime time.
So third thing for me is that I find increasingly now getting stuck in what I'll call sycophantic echoes. And there's two different concepts that I'm munging together in this thing. One is the sycophancy, right? So I'm thinking about changing one of our web pages, to say this. What happens? Here's what I'm thinking about doing. What's the first thing that it says? What a great idea. So automatically, here's my thing. I'm not getting any sort of point of view. I'm not getting any sort of pushback. I'm not getting any response that's really giving me any critical thinking. At times it'll go through and say, this is what's good and here's some things to think about. But that first top line just makes you feel good. Oh, I've already done it. I'm great. It's such a great idea.
I know people like this.
And so the conditioning is,
you aren't one of them.
Don't worry about the challenge things that I put in the bottom of the page. We'll come back to it later. Because it's such a great idea. The other part that's interesting is this.
It's called reinforcement learning.
The echo effect. The echo effect, which is that and this is in ChatGPT because it's building a memory, I'm hearing my ideas come back and again and again. Now, I know I have brilliant ideas. Like, I know they're just amazing, right?
Sure.
So it's nice that I hear them back. But for the rest of the world, no, it's, no, but seriously, like, I'll come back and
Well,
I'll
what
get,
happens when someone puts in a completely different idea, but it still gets the same answer on the same topic?
I don't know. And by the way, you're not allowed to hijack my ChatGPT and write different things and make different memories for me.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. No, but seriously, this echo effect is actually becoming, I'm having to really employ critical thinking when I see a list of different things, looking at new ideas or looking at, I'm obviously thinking a bit about stuff working on the business competition. And then I see names and things that I'm like, wait, I wrote that down some number of weeks ago in another chat.
Shannon Valley kind of AI mirror. It took me a while to cotton on to this, actually. I had the same experience that what came back to me was like, oh, wow, you get me.
Yeah.
You're looking at that. You're reading the same things. Oh, I didn't realize that topic was something so big in the world. And then I went, that's because it's my topic.
Exactly. But the first reaction
isn't told. It's not clear.
Yeah.
So you tend to forget it.
Yeah. But you also get this reaction of, oh, I'm right. Right. But you're only right because it's playing back the same ideas. So this sort of sycophantic echo thing, you're so smart and this is, I'm giving you all the answers that you've already given me. So those are the three sort of key sort of challenges. And I have sort of three ideas of places to go. One is I'm going to draw on the talk that Jonathan Colton gave at our summit in October, where he talked about songwriting and co-writing of songs, and it was a brilliant presentation. It really was. For those who didn't join us, he described the process of co-writing a song with Amy Mann by playing back these little audio clips as they debated words. And then he talked about what it would mean for an AI to be a good songwriter. And one of the core things, which I think is important here, is that it has to have a point of view. Like, you want your partner in writing a song, in a document, in a whatever, to have a point of view that pushes and pulls, so that when you do agree, you go, oh, okay, we are actually aligned. But at other times, there's a push and pull that you have to figure out. So I wanted sort of this partner point of view, I think, is a key thing. The second is some change to the workflow that in somewhere between encourages and requires some level of wandering, right? I want to work on this. Okay, well, let's take a wander in and around these ideas. Let's look at some other things. Let's bring in some other concepts that engages your thinking to sort of go through that wandering process to sort of figure out if you've got everything in there that you need, or if there's other adjacent ideas that you want to do, something else that might change your mind. But these models have that ability, right? They're finding,
designing an explore, exploit.
Yeah. So take a path and then find a few other vectors that are kind of close and give you something else to sort of work with.
And this should be a core value, but you don't. We're shortcutters. So
we're shortcutters, and the model companies are shortcutters because why? It costs them money, right? So they're trying to answer you with as few prompts as possible because they want you to get the job done and move on. Since we're not paying by use, we're paying by month, and they're trying to make sure that they're giving us everything for the $20 or whatever dollars, a month. They're not actually incentivized to get into a long conversation because it'll burn through all your prompts and then you get dissatisfied because you've run out, which I do with Claude, right? It gets to the end and I get ticked off. I'm like, really? I'm done? I have to wait until, by the way, it's always like 7 p.m. You're like, really?
Mine's 6. So.
Exactly. But this wandering, I think, would be. The other is like the idea of shifting from sycophantic to Socratic. Can you move from something which is like, oh, you're so amazing, to something that starts with questions, that starts to dig in, to sort of draw it out? Like, if you think about it, you're presenting something to, whether it's me or a prof or, one of the people who's standing up and giving a talk at the summit, and people are ready with questions to try and help dig in, to draw it out. Not sometimes it's a challenge, sometimes it's just to dig deeper, but some sort of Socratic method built into the tool, I think, would encourage critical thinking and would prevent offloading, because you do have to then answer questions. And wouldn't that be interesting?
And I think these are sort of template styles, if you like. You know, having a process of doing that. In my Claude instance, I have a style like that. Then I select it when I want it. But I use it a lot, and I kind of know it's there, and I wouldn't say I'm a particularly sophisticated user, and you know, I don't do like massive data analysis or anything like using any of these sorts of things. But I'm pretty facile at understanding how to get the best out of these things for me. And one of them is to have multiple different styles, and that is a style. But if you're just a, you know, every now and again kind of user, or you're in a hurry all the time and sitting on a deadline or whatever it is, you wouldn't necessarily. These takes habits. There's muscle memory to this. It's an experience-driven process. So I agree with you. There's a trade-off between having no structure and having too much structure. I'm not sure we've seen exactly how to find the sweet spot right now.
No, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to decide when it's important for somebody to have the structure, when it's not. Sometimes you just want a quick answer, and that's great. Other times you need to actually have some critical thinking. And we don't know how to do that quite yet.
No. One more thing.
Yes.
It's kind of the elephant in the AI room right now. This phase change we're sitting in the middle of, this big political, social, techno-social change that's happening right now. I think this is a context to 2025. And I think the fascinating thing about this context is for a very long time, the development of AI at a big picture level has had a degree of dampening and negative feedback from governance, from where it's either been neutral to negative in terms of whether it's the narrative, the rhetoric, the investment, you know, just the whole structure. And we've had this discussion happening over the last couple of years about how AGI is going to come, or artificial super intelligence, or artificial super useful intelligence, whatever, you know, pick your. But there's this moment right now where we've got a bifurcation and a phase change that's sort of happening at the same time. We've got companies and users wrestling with how to make the best of using these tools. And we're seeing in the survey data some little bit of a drop-off. At the same time, we're seeing the big powerhouses saying, we think we're going to have AGI soon. And we're kind of amazed at what's happening, and we all better get ready. And that bifurcation matters because it matters massively for the design of these products. One of them is highly human-centered and requires quite a rethink, the one we've just been talking about. The other one, maybe not. We might not need that. We might just text chat and specific thing. We just don't know. And then right in the middle of this, we've now got a phase change in terms of that amplification, the positive feedback cycle, the increasing, it literally just positive feedback that's going to happen. There's no dampening processes and amplification process between the sort of political economy and the technology here. And if people are sitting there thinking, you know, what's going to happen in 2025, 2026, the one thing we do know is massive change here, driven by what are essentially narratives, but really, really important overarching sort of narrative structures. The culture change here is just phenomenal for the AI industry. And, you know, that's something that's top of our minds. So that was my one more thing. Without getting into the politics, it's really this link between AI and the positive feedback that can happen with this change.
I like that idea. Let's come back to that and maybe have a full episode on it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we're pulling us together in terms of our 2025 research program. So that's kind of, we'll be publishing some stuff on that and talking about that.
Great.
But certainly the research program goes into it with this context in mind.
Great. For those of you who like our discussions, check out our Artificiality Summit coming up in October 23 to 25 in Bend, Oregon. You can find it at artificiality.world/summit. We have some great speakers lined up, more coming, and shoot us a message, fill in the form on the page, however you'd like to do it. Send an email to hello@artificiality.world if you're interested in joining us. And for that, we'll leave it here and talk to you again next week.